praise your name. I will praise your name. When times of need carry on, I will praise your name. I will praise your name. Though darkness falls all around, I will praise your name. I will praise your name. If I forget what I found, I will praise your name. I will praise your name. For you are faithful, Lord, you lift my head. You're my provider. You're my strength and joy. I'll trust you, Lord. I'll worship you. I love you, Lord. I'll honor you. Lord, I will lift up my soul. I will praise your name. I will praise your name. If I feel lost and alone, I will praise your name. I will praise your name. Though I may labor in vain, I will praise your name. I will praise your name. Through all the heartache and pain, I will praise your name. I will praise your name. For you are faithful, Lord, you lift my head. You're my provider. You're my strength and joy. I'll trust you, Lord. I'll worship you. I love you, Lord. I'll honor. I will trust you, Lord. I'll trust you, Lord. I'll worship everything I say. I love you, Lord. I'll honor you. I'll trust, never let me go. I'll worship, never let me down. I'll love, forever I will love you. I'll love, I'll trust every hour, every day. I'll worship, that's why I worship you. I'll praise you, Lord. I'll honor you. Lord, I will lift up my song. I will praise your name. I will praise your name.
Hallelujah. Let Lord Jesus Christ shine forth. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining us. Welcome to another live stream with DCCI Ministries, and have the privilege of having Jay Smith with us all the way from the US. Peace of Christ be with you, Jay. How are you?
Well, pretty good now that I see your smiley face.
Well, I am the most humble and most smiley person you will ever meet in your life.
No, I'm not the most smiley. That's not for sure. For
You
sure.
are,
Seen
you
many
are
people.
just being racist right now.
I'm not going to argue that, but certainly one of the best on these material and in the material that we're going to be doing today. Yeah.
How are you doing?
Good. we're heading off to do a lot of traveling starting next week. But this is good that you caught me at this time.
Good. You canceled on me other day.
Yes, I had to because my researcher found some new material, which I'm going to introduce today.
Thank you. Thank you for being available for me. So I am struggling from my side with the sound issues. Those of you who are joining us in the chat, it's good to have you. Can you be kind enough and then just confirm that sound is okay right now? I've been pretty much stressed about it and I don't know how to fix it. So we will see if it's gonna make through the live stream. So while I was talking with you a few weeks ago, Jay, you brought into my attention that we were talking about whether Muhammad is exist or not. You brought into my attention that one of the Muslim missionary put up a video to simply debunk you. I wanted to watch it and then I asked you to do a stream with me to kind of respond what he's saying. If I understood correctly, overall he was debunking you and Al-Fadi simply saying Muhammad was exist because hadith says so. And today I just thought you just jump in and then kind of help us to see what he's saying and if there is any truth in it. Overall, let me ask you a very basic question. Do you think Muhammad was exist?
Well, the question you're asking is, did the Muhammad of Islam exist? That Muhammad never existed. There were many Muhammads, yes. There are quite a few Muhammads. And as you're seeing from the news material we're just putting up in the last few weeks, the Muhammad is not, that word doesn't even, that word is not written, it didn't exist in a written form in the 7th century. Because in order to have Muhammad, you have to have 3 vowels. There were no vowels. So the Muhammad, take the vowels out and you get Muhammad. That Muhammad did exist. And we have lots of reference to him. And what we have found about that Muhammad, the Muhammad, is pretty exciting. But that's not for this time. That's not for here. Because we're going to go into a whole nother area. And that is, what about the Muhammad, the one you're asking about? What about the Muhammad of Islam? What about the Muhammad? And I'm emphasizing that because that requires 3 vowels, the Dhamma, Nafata, Nafata. What about that Muhammad? Where does he come from? So if he didn't exist, what do we know about this Muhammad and what are Muslims dependent on concerning this Muhammad? The Muhammad supposedly that lived in a place called Mecca and was the one that received a book called the Quran between 610 and 632, that 22-year period. That Muhammad, that person, we just find out that there is hardly anything on him. In fact, you're going to see after today that everything we know about that Muhammad, the Muhammad of Islam, let's just call him the Muhammad of Islam, did not even come from the periods that I have been quoting for years, that you have been quoting for years. We have been lying through our teeth and we didn't even know it. But, apologize and give us our due.
Okay, you are going so fast. First of all, yes, I was asking about Muhammad of Islam, whom approximately 2 million people are simply, billion people are simply worshipping, honoring, and even killing in his name. The ones who are faithfully trying to follow him. So I was asking about that Muhammad. And I don't think I was lying at all. I'm just using what the Islamic sources are telling me. And so I am already seeing that we've got people in the chat who, some of them are agreeing with you, some of them are disagreeing with you. It's absolutely fine. And especially those of you who are disagreeing, please put your questions or comments in the chat. I can make sure we bring them to Jay. And he can answer your questions. And probably end of this live stream, I am hoping that you will go back and thinking, yes, there are serious questions on the Prophet of Islam when it comes to historical side of Islam. That's the aim. So we are going to watch a clip from Farid Response, and I think clip is altogether 8 minutes 55 seconds, if I remember correctly. And if everything goes well, if God is gracious to us, because I am having some sound issues from my side for the video. Hopefully you will hear the video. Video is simply kind of just Muslim missionaries trying to debunk what Jay is saying. So what we will do, Jay, is as we go through the video, the parts you want me to pause, just tell me to pause and then I'll pause it. If still I can't hear video from my side, I will ask you to simply summarize what he's saying and then we kind of respond to what he's saying. Are you okay with that plan?
That's fine. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. And those of you who are in the chat, please, freedom of speech is very much welcomed and encouraged, but do not abuse the chat. That means please don't post the same message again and again. That's just like really not helpful to anyone. And if you've got any sound issues as I play the clip, please let me know and we can kind of try to come with plan B. I don't know if there is plan B, but we will see. We will see. Ready, Jay?
Let's do it.
Are you sure?
I'm ready.
Okay, good.
That this is referring to. Could there be someone named Muhammad in the 7th century that they're redacting their Muhammad back onto, or did actually exist?
No need for introduction. Time to give these guys an education. Fire intro. In this video, we got Al-Fadi and Jay Smith trying to educate us about the history of Muhammad, peace be upon him, and they're claiming that he never existed, and I'm going to show you how ignorant these two guys are and how unfamiliar they are with Islamic sources. But ignorance isn't their main issue. The much bigger issue is a lack of consistency, and I have a question for these guys that will help us get to the bottom of things. I hope that their viewers, the Christian audience, ask them and press them on the questions I'm going to be asking them towards the end of the video.
Let's see the first biography. The first biography of what Muhammad did is written by this guy here, Ibn Ishaq.
Right.
Look at his date, 765.
140 years already, or 30 years after Muhammad's death.
That's a problem, isn't it?
I mean, it's impossible that Ibn Ishaq lived for that long.
No, he did not live for. It's obviously he was not living when Jesus was living. He did not know. I'm sorry. Well, Jesus, of course, Muhammad was living.
Right.
He would not have known him. He would not have seen him. He would not have heard anything about him.
Right.
So you cannot say he's an eyewitness. Did he get it from the eyewitnesses? We have no idea. So it says the life of Muhammad, a translation of Ibn Ishaq's Siratu Rasulullah, which means the biography of the Prophet
That's
Muhammad.
right, Sirat Rasulullah, exactly. That's a sirah right there.
That is a lie.
Yeah.
This is what everybody has been taught. This is what you have been taught. I have been taught that this was written by Ibn Ishaq. Look how thick it is.
Right, and the reason why people buy into it, because no one, sadly, either dares to publicly question it, or at least if they question it, they keep it to themselves and they don't bring it up out front, basically.
Actually, the book in Jay's hand is by Alfred Guillaume, who was a Christian. So when Al-Fadi's saying nobody dares to publicly question it, he's being absolutely silly and he's trying to play into this whole conspiracy idea. The reason why Guillaume refers to the book as The Life of Muhammad by Muhammad bin Ishaq, it's because it's a reconstruction of the original. It's not only based on the rendition by Ibn Hisham. Allow me to explain. Ibn Ishaq wrote a
Okay, I'm gonna stop there because I have no idea what he was saying so far, Jay.
Yeah, let me just say, basically what
I can't hear anything from this side. So if
Okay.
you kind of simply summarize what is happening, and then I'll try to figure out from this side if there is anything I can do.
but the others can hear it. They've written that they can hear
Yeah.
it. Okay,
Yeah, but
let's-
I don't know if he's talking about like how he makes his cup of tea, or if he's talking about Ibn Ishaq. I have no idea what he's talking about. So
he's talking about this book here. So what he's saying, and he's quoting me, and that's fair. That's no problem there. He's quoting me. He's taking what I said on quite a few years ago. I'm not sure when I did that particular episode, and he's saying that everything we know about Muhammad comes from this guy here, Ibn Ishaq. This one here, Ibn Ishaq, and I put up on the screen there the date for Ibn Ishaq. He dies in 765, so mid-8th century. And I'm about ready to confront that now. And what I do say is, no, when you open the pages, when you look at the introduction, it's very clear that this does not come from Ibn Ishaq. It actually comes from Ibn Hisham via one of his students, one of the students of Ibn Ishaq, al-Baqai. And now there are three students, and he's going to go into that and talk about three students that come from Ibn Ishaq. One is called Yunus, one is called al-Baqai, and the other one is called Salama. And he's going to put a graph there showing that these are the three that get it from Ibn Ishaq. And Ibn Hisham, who's now in the 9th century, who dies in 833, possibly in the last 20 years of his life, gets it from al-Bakai. So he's saying Jay's got it wrong there, which is, listen, that's in the introduction, so there's no reason for me to repeat that. So
Okay.
of course I'm not saying that. I'm saying that the earliest extant manuscript that we have is Ibn Hisham, because we don't have Yunus, we don't have al-Bakai, we don't have Salama, we don't have any of those. We just have attributions. You're familiar with what we mean by attributions. Someone has said that they got it from there, but there's nothing there to show for it. Now, in some ways, he's opening up a huge can of worms here, which he doesn't realize he's doing. He's already admitting that this is coming from much later. So that's the first admission. And here's the difficulty. You can attribute all you want. You can claim that something comes from another person or another place, and you can claim that this is something that you're taking verbatim and you're writing out. But even Ibn Hisham says that he throws out much of what he didn't like and retained that which he liked. So you can make these claims, but the difficulty is this. Why is it we don't have Ibn Ishaq's original manuscript? Remember, look and see where we are. We're in the caliphal courts. We're in Ibn Ishaq is during the Abbasid period. They come to power in 749, let's say 750. So mid-8th century, they now take the headquarters from Damascus and bring it way down to Baghdad. And so this is their first biographer who writes down the prophet's own life. So you're in the caliphal courts. That means you're not writing on papyrus. You're writing on parchment or vellum, right? You're writing on the best writing material available. Where is it? We're only talking about 1400 years ago. So we don't have anything from Ibn Ishaq. That's the first problem. Now he's admitting that. But we're talking about 130 years after Muhammad. We have nothing written down. And this is just the first guy to write it down. Certainly, if he is given that responsibility by the caliph, why can't we find his original manuscript? So, obviously, his students write what they hear, and they write it down, and then they either recite it or give it to Ibn Hisham, who then writes it down sometime in the 9th century. So we're talking about another 70 years later, it's finally written down. Who is Ibn Hisham? He is commissioned by the caliph at that time in the 9th century to write it down. Now, this is therefore what we see in this book. I'm now up to this book, right? And Farid now is going to really complain, right, left, and center. And what he's going to do next is, he says, Jay doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm just reading what's right here in the introduction. I'm not even going beyond what this book claims. That's as far as I've gotten, and he's already complaining with me. But it's going to get worse. It's going to get worse. So hold on. Let's see what he says next. But can you see, immediately we've got to put that out there. If this is the caliphal court, if this is the richest, really, by this time, the caliph controls all the way from Spain to India, from Turkey all the way down to Yemen, the second largest superpower of his day. The only ones that would be comparable would be the Byzantine Empire, which is over to the west. So if this is the case, and this is his official biographer of the greatest prophet in the history of mankind, the final prophet, this is his life, then of course he would have written this down on some type of parchment or vellum, something that could still exist today. This is easy for animal skin to exist today. Listen, we have the Sinaiticus, we have the Alexandrinus, we have the Vaticanus, 3 metropolitan codices that are from the 4th and 5th century. That's 200 to 300 years earlier that are complete. You can go to the British Library right there in London and see the Sinaiticus and the Alexandrinus from the 4th and 5th century. You can go to the Vatican in Rome and see the Alexandrinus again from the 4th century. And they are complete, and they're on animal skin. They don't disintegrate like papyrus does. Papyrus disintegrates, but none of this is written on papyrus.
Okay.
These are written on animal skin. So where is Ibn Ishaq's original? That's all we're asking to begin with. And by that,
before that, are you not also asking, since Muhammad died in 632, why this is the so-called one of the earliest biography of Muhammad? Why don't we have anything, first of all, before Ibn Hisham or before Ibn Ishaq? That's like one of the question. And also you are asking, if sake of the argument, let's say there is things before that as early, where are your evidences outside of your oral tradition? Also, I am assuming you are questioning, where is the original manuscripts of Ibn Ishaq?
Oh, he's going to get much better than this. We're going to get, as you play it, you're going to see he's going to start picking books off the shelf. He says Jay doesn't know what he's talking about. Look at, here's somebody here. This
Slow
is
down. Jay.
this is Ibn Shayba. He's going to talk about Ibn Ahmad. He's going to talk about Malik ibn Anas, and he's going to pick another book by Sahifa Ahmad bin Munabi. He's going to start showing all of these that predate Ibn Hisham.
Can we
That's
take,
why we need to shut this down.
okay, can we take baby steps for me? You are speaking too fast. You are too much. Already half of the video is finished, but we've only done the 3 minutes. So we want people to follow what's happening. Okay. So I'm gonna play the video. Remember, I have no idea what he's talking about because I can't hear from my side. I don't know how to fix it. So therefore, I am all depend on you. When he changes the topic or the argument, give me signal to stop it, and then we take it from there. Is that okay? And when you want me to show the PowerPoints, you need to tell me that as well. So I'm playing the video now. Good.
Muhammad, peace be upon him, he taught this book to multiple students that wrote it from him. He continued to revise his book, which is why his students have different renditions of it. His student Ziyad al-Bakkai taught the book to Ibn Hisham. This is the most common version of the book today. Other versions of Ibn Ishaq can be found.
Okay. Look at that. Look at that. Just look. I just want you to see this. So can you see what he's saying now? Already, here you have Ibn Ishaq, and he has Yunus al-Bakkai, and he has Salama. And notice he has 2 books pictured there. So that means these are in book form. All right, just hold on to that. That's significant. Now continue.
Okay.
Found elsewhere, quoted by Tabari, for example, and others.
This real, we're going to be talking about this later on. So let's go back to the slide. So then who wrote this? Not Ibn Ishaq. This is the guy that wrote it, Ibn Hisham. I'm going to throw away Ibn Ishaq. Go back to the slide. I've thrown him away. He's now disappeared. Why? Because he just does not exist in this discussion. We know nothing from Ibn Ishaq. We know from Ibn Hisham.
This is incorrect because we actually have Ibn Ishaq's book that comes through the path of Yunus bin Bukayr. This is not new information, by the way, since the rendition by Yunus was printed in the 1970s. Unfortunately, both of these experts are oblivious to it. I'd also like to add that Sirat ibn Ishaq isn't the earliest Sirah available to us. I actually have a copy of Sulaiman bin Tarkhan's Sirah. Sulaiman is actually a student of Anas bin Malik, one of the servants of the Prophet, peace be upon him. By the way, the reason why Jay and Al-Fadi are trying to push back the sources as far as possible is because they want you to believe that everything that we know about Muhammad, peace be upon him, is unreliable, and so that they can push their theory, which I'll mention at the end of the video.
But there's another genre, and that's what we know as the sayings. The sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, that is the hadith. The first to write them down in a categorized form, to compile them, is Al-Bukhari. Look at his dates, 870.
That's absolutely incorrect. We actually have multiple works that predate al-Bukhari. We have, for example, Musannaf ibn Abi Shayba, which predates al-Bukhari. I got a copy of Musnad Abu Dawud al-Tayalisi right here. I got a copy of Musnad Ahmad right here. I got a copy of Muwatta Malik right here. All these books predate al-Bukhari by quite a bit. And the earliest of these books is Sahifat Hammam, which was written within 50 years from the death of the Prophet, peace be upon him. Hammam is also a student of a companion of the Prophet, peace be upon him.
You also then have Sahih Muslim, who died in 875. Then you have Al-Dimiri, who dies in 884. Then you have Ibn Majah, who dies in 887, followed by Abu Dawud, who dies in 899, and then An-Nasai. I should let you read their names because my Arabic is desecrated.
No problem. An-Nasai. So these are the...
I love how Jay asks Al-Fadi to help him pronounce one of the names, and ironically, Al-Fadi gets it wrong. Al-Fadi, his name is not Al-Nisai, it's Al-Nasai. Al-Nisai is a section in which your good friend David buys his clothes from.
There is two other genres that come up, and there we'll put them in brown. The tafsir, which are the commentaries on the Quran, and then you have the tariq, which are the histories of mankind. So those are the 4 genres. Who is the first to write down the tafsir and tariq? Well, it's this character right here, At-Tabari.
Exactly.
But look at his dates.
I know.
That's the 10th century.
As usual, Jay is ignorant about books of tafsir, and we have classical tafsir that predate al-Tabari by quite a while, like Tafsir Abd al-Razzaq. I got here a copy of Tafsir Ibn Jurayj, which predates Tafsir al-Tabari by over 150 years. By the way, Al-Fadi, since you are not correcting Jay in regards to these basics, I have to assume that you are as ignorant as him. Let's move on to another criticism made by these guys.
None of the
Okay, I'm gonna pause here for a bit because like we've done over 6 minutes. So what do we have so far, Jay, here?
Okay, and this is what I said he's going to do. He's going to start pulling back all these different copies off of his shelf. Now, notice he doesn't really stay on them. He doesn't show us, nor does he open up one page to say when they were actually written. That's what he's claiming, that they were written by so-and-so. He says, you have the Muwatta ibn Malik. He says that is, and he goes through a whole list of those that are written all before Sahih Bukhari. Muwatta, Sahih Haman bin Munubi talks about the Musnad ibn Hanbal, the Musnad Abdul Razak, the Musnad al-Tailisi, and also Ibn Shayba. These are ones he just throws out there. And you're kind of swimming to hear all, and then he puts up a quick graph showing where they are on a timeline, but he puts it up for just 1 second. Hugely important. Why do you think he just put it up for 1 second? Because he didn't want us to really look at it and really focus on it, because that's what we need. And so I grabbed that, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the PowerPoint, because I'm going to show you that all of these names that he put up there, including Ibn Dawud, Nisai, Ibn Majah, Jami al-Tirmidhi. He also talked about the Muslim and Sahih Bukhari, and then he also mentioned al-Tabari. All of these, you're saying, there are writers that do the same type of genre that predate these classical traditional writers that we've been quoting. And the classical traditional writers that we've always quoted are from the 9th and 10th century. And he's saying these all predate the 9th and 10th century, especially what he called the Sahaba and the Tabi'un. Now, he didn't call it the Tabi'un, but that's what they're known in the classical form. These are the companions of the Prophet and the second generation. So all of these are written by the companions and the second generation, and he's splitting them up into 2 genres, which is good. I have no problem with that.
Okay,
so what we need to do is we need to now look and see exactly when these books were written.
Okay, so before we do that, did he finish all of his argument about the surah?
No, that's what I wanted you to keep going. There's still a bit more that he needs to talk about. So just finish what he's saying, then we'll come back.
Okay, it's just like very difficult to follow everything if we are going to watch all of the video. But okay, let me continue.
Traditional writers who talk about Muhammad, what he did and what he said, either lived or worked in Mecca and Medina, like the tradition suggests. They were much too far to the north of Mecca and came from west and east of Baghdad.
I'm not really sure what the argument is.
Stop.
No, go ahead. Now I see it just came on for me. Go ahead.
Okay. Here, Jay is speaking about authors of these works being originally from faraway places, or that they're being written in faraway places, in order to suggest that these works are not reliable. It just doesn't really make much sense, since a historian that's taking information from another source doesn't need to be at the original place of an event. Either way, all of these scholars ultimately go to Al-Hijaz, and they take hadiths from areas like Mecca and Medina there, so I'm not really sure where they're going with this point. By the way, their alternative theory is that the original Muhammad is an Iraqi.
Okay, now he's going to go and he's going to say something foolish. But let's go ahead and let's just unpack what he's done here. And this is the major part of his criticism. So let's go ahead and let's bring up the PowerPoint. And I'd like you to start with go to slide number. Since I can't control it, I want you to start with slide number 10.
Okay. So before I put them up on the screen, who does he say that the surahs were written and we have them before Ibn Ishaq or before Ibn Hisham? So what are the names he's giving us?
Okay, he's giving us the Muwatta ibn Malik. He's giving us the Sahifa Haman bin Munabi, which he claims these are all 7th century. He's given us the Musnad ibn Hanbal. He's also put up there the Musannaf Abdul Razak, the Musnad al-Tayalisi, and the Abi Shayba. Those are the 5 he puts up there. So okay, I'm going to.
They're all before Ibn Ishaq, according.
They're all 7th and 8th century, so they're all before 9th century.
Okay. You said slide number 10.
7th century. And these are what is known as, some of them are known as the Sahaba, which would be the companions of the Prophet, and the others are the Tabi'un, which would be the second generation. Now, obviously, there's one like Abi Shaiba, who is actually 8th century, so that's a little later. But most of these are saying, what he's trying to say is, Jay, you're using much later material from the 9th and 10th century. I want to use the stuff from the 7th century. Now, I'm going to do two things here, because there is a reason why almost all the Muslim scholars and Western scholars today go to the traditional writers. They don't go to Ibn Malik or Manabi or Hanbal or Razak or Tayalisi or Shaiba. And there's a reason for that. And that is, none of them are complete, and they're bits of pieces here and there. And there's nothing in a compilation that they can look at. And also, there is just so much doubt as to what their dates are. There's nothing more than names given to them. However, we have actually run down every one of these, and we have found the earliest dates for the earliest manuscripts. That's what I want to get at. We're going to show you. You can attribute all you want. You've got to go to the earliest manuscript that exists today that we can look at to know when actually this was written down and attributed to someone named that, yes. But where is the earliest extant manuscript? But before that, I want you to put up look at slide number 10, if you wouldn't mind, because that's the one that I'm now going to take what he's saying. This is Farid's, these are Farid's own quotes. So I'm going to look at each one he said. He's talking about in fact, to go to the slide before that, let's go to the slide before that, number 9. And this is the one with the sit-up. Now he's saying that the sit-up, since it's the first thing to come up, it's the earliest that most scholars use, and that because it's written by Ibn Ishaq, though rewritten and compiled by Ibn Hisham from the 9th century. This is by far the earliest of all the classical 4 traditions. The Sirah is the earliest, and he claims that this is even Hisham. He would claim that these are 9th century. That's what's the claim in that book that's there on the right. Here's the problem. Alfred Guillaume is took the book that was written in German and translated into English. That's all Alfred Guillaume does. So forget about Alfred Guillaume. He's the one that took it, put it in English, and made an awful lot of money on it. The man who really is responsible for that book called The Life of Muhammad, this book right here that I have in my hand, is not Alfred Guillaume, and it's certainly not Ibn Hisham. That's what I want to get at. And this is what Farid is not talking about, because he may not know this. This book, this huge compilation that we're looking at, that's been attributed to Ibn Hisham, attributed to what's his name? I'm going to get his name right. Al-Bakai, attributed to Ibn Ishaq. Bakai, and then Ibn Hisham, those 3, none of this comes from them. So where does this come from? This huge tome that we all use. It comes from this gentleman that you see on the screen here. His name is Heinrich Ferdinand Wustenfeld, a German scholar who between 1858 and 1860 in Germany going to 4 different German cities. Let me repeat that. German cities, going into the libraries of those German cities and grabbing as many different bits of stories in Arabic. These are all Arabic stories. He's an Arabist himself. He put together what he considered to be the life of Muhammad, the Sirah of Muhammad. And then he published it in 1860, attributing this to Ibn Hisham. So he puts it back to a man named Ibn Hisham. Not one word that we see in this book comes from Ibn Hisham. It was created 160 years ago by that German scholar. So therefore, the man who Muslims are dependent on to know who their prophet is, to know what he did, is an elderly German linguist who wrote Muhammad's story 160 years ago, that 1,000 years too late. Now, I don't know if Fadi's aware of that. He may not. Nonetheless, Muslims need to answer that, because where is this Ibn Hisham's extant manuscript? Okay, show it to me.
Jay, let me ask a question. Let me ask a quick question. So if I understood correctly, you are saying Wustenfeld in 1800s visited different libraries in Germany, compiled the biography of Muhammad or the writings about Muhammad, and then put together a book. And then current version is just simply translation of that book. Is that correct? Did I understand
that's what we're looking, and that's what everybody uses today in all your schools to know what Muhammad did. No. Not the only one.
Sorry, Wustenfeld didn't have one manuscript which kind of summarized everything, but he had to go to the libraries, search and compile something together, correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
So a little bit from this library, a little bit from this library. Now, the next question is, where did these libraries get these Arabic stories from? That no one has bothered to do yet. No one has looked to see. And when I talked to Dr. Robert Kerr, who is the one that really has been introducing this from the Inada group there in Germany, this man reads and writes 10 languages. He is head of, has a chair of department there in Saarland University in Saarbrücken, where he teaches all in German. He also has a chair in Brussels University, where he teaches everything in French. This man who I've been working with, he is the one that said, no one's even bothered to ask that question that you're asking, because what I really want to know is where are all these scraps? They're still there today, folks. Why haven't Muslims gone through these scraps that are in these German libraries, and why haven't they attributed them back, found where they come from? Where are the extant manuscripts from which they're derived? They're just bits and pieces that he put together to make a cohesive story, so we knew who this Muhammad was. What we're finding is that there are others who have done it. In 1967, Fuad Sezgin did much the same thing, but not from German universities. He went to Morocco and grabbed material that he found in Morocco. So what we need to do now is look at Sezgin's biography that he put together in 1967, that's in the last century, and compare it with Wistenfeld's biography that he compiled in the 1860s. So because of that, you can see there's an awful lot of work we need to do, but none of these come from someone named Ibn Hisham.
Okay.
Let's go to the next slide. You start to see what we're doing. So go to the next slide, and here is what Fadi's trying to say. So he's trying to say that on the left, look on the left side. Notice on the left side, you have all the supposed 9th century and what we call the 9th and 10th century traditional writers. This is the standard Islamic narrative that we're always quoting. You've quoted it, I've quoted it, everybody quotes it. These are the 4 genres of what we know as the Sirah, the Hadith, the Tafsir, and the Tahrir, but this is now the Hadith. These are the Hadith, the sayings, not the biography now. We're now going to the sayings, the Hadith. And when you look at the Hadith, we know that there are 6 major compilations, and the names are all well known: Ibn Abu Dawud, An-Nasai, Ibn Majah, Jami' al-Tirmidhi, Sahih Muslim, and Sahih Bukhari. Those are the ones that we have always known, and you've heard me say it, you've said it, Hatun, many times, that these are 9th and 10th century, because we've seen the dates for when these men died. And they were all writing within 30 to 20 years before they died. We have had that wrong. All the way through, we have had that wrong. Look and see when the first extant manuscripts for any of these individuals. So Abu Dawud is not from the 9th century. His first manuscript that is given his name, that's attributed him, is from the 11th century. That's 200 years later. An-Nasai is not from the 9th century. The first extant manuscript we have for An-Nasai is from the 12th century. When you get to Ibn Majah, the first extant manuscript we have for Ibn Majah is from the 13th century. That's 400 years later. Jami' al-Tirmidhi, that is not from the 9th century, but from the 14th century. That's 500 years later. The same with Sahih Muslim. Remember, Sahih Muslim is second only to Sahih Bukhari in importance. And it's by far the one that most Muslims have to use to know how to walk, talk, eat, and drink. That does not come from somebody named Muslim in the 9th century. It was first written down in the 14th century. The earliest extant manuscript we have for Sahih Muslim is not to the 14th century. That's 500 years later. And now we get to the motherlode, the big old Sahih Bukhari. You can't get someone more important than Sahih Bukhari. Why? Because he is really what every Muslim is dependent on. And we've always assumed that before he died in 870, that everything was written within 20 years. Remember, he was the one that was given 600,000 of these stories, these akhbars. And he whittled them down, threw out 98% of it, and brought it down to 7,397. That's the story you've all heard, I've heard. I've always assumed that story was correct. And for that last 20 years, he whittled it down from 600,000 of these stories down to 7,397, basically only retaining 2%. Everything that I've just told you, there go the balloons. See, even the Muslims are excited about this. Everything I've just told you is turning out to be a lie. There is nothing written in the 9th century by Sahih Bukhari. The first extant manuscript we get for Sahih Bukhari is not to the 14th and 15th century. That's 500 to 600 years later.
Okay, let me just cut in and then put some informations there. I can't talk on that much with the details for Sahih Muslim, Tirmidhi, Majar, Nasai, and Dawud, because I haven't looked into them deeper. But I remember looking into Sahih Bukhari. Remember, Muslim scholars used to say everything in Sahih Bukhari was Sahih. And then as the time went on, suddenly things in Sahih Bukhari become non-Sahih. So some of the Sahih Bukhari's hadiths were not reliable anymore. So at that stage, I don't know if you were still at the corner or not, we looked into Sahih Bukhari. So he was born in Turkestan, West Turkestan, okay? Approximately like over 3,000 kilometers away from what is happening in Arabia. He started traveling when he was 17. So think about this. So he dies in 870. So he started traveling from age 17. He spends 2 years in Mecca. And then Medina, altogether, he spent 6 years in Mecca and Medina. And then he, like years, approximately 200 years after death of Muhammad, he starts like compiling the Muhammad story. Like that, I find that's like already like miracle, Islamic way of miracling. Within 6 years, he kind of meets with people, travels by animals or by foot, and then collects all the informations by people who never met with Muhammad. By people who never met Muhammad. He goes to Basra, he goes to Baghdad, he goes to Egypt, all that. And those places are very far. You express that he had altogether like over 600,000 hadiths, and then he brought them down to 7,000 something. And the way he made his judgment was simply because he had a dream to kind of identify what is false hadith, what is sahih hadith, what is false, what is true hadith. Through dream, he kind of put that together. I find that's like already suspicion and not reliable at all. And then I've got this map. I'm going to put it on the screen. I don't know if you can see it or not. So all I am trying to add into your information is, even when you kind of ignore the history, if you sake of the argument don't care about the history, even traditional account tells us there are certain dodgy things are happening. And they're like pretty dodgy. So look at this mind map. I don't know. It's very small. Sorry about that. So you've got Sahih Bukhari. And then Sahih Bukhari has 4 people who takes his hadith from. Okay? And then from these 4 people, tradition talks about how Muslims were disagreeing, like how these 4 people were disagreeing with one another, how many hadith is there, and what is Sahih or not. Okay? From this 4 hadith, something happens from these 4 people. 3 people's hadith and their compilation simply get lost. And then only 1 person survives. Okay? That's the Muhammad al-Farbari. Approximately 250 years after this. Okay? From him, you've got approximately 17 people. Not, sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 people. From him, you've got 9 people who takes Bukhari. At this stage, Bukhari is already in hell, okay? And then the person who took from Bukhari, Farbari, has 9 to 10 people who is taking from him. And then people are taking from this guy. And then some people have 3 students, some people have 4 students, all that. And then miracle happens, like all those people who are disagreeing with one another, we lost all of their hadith. We don't have them. And only thing what survived was simply something which has been canonized in 1313 after Hijrah. So that's 1800s. Current Sahih Bukhari, even you just go with like traditional account, is pretty much dodgy, and it's been only canonized in 1800s.
This is Bukhari or this is Sirah? Because the Bukhari I have.
This is just Bukhari. No, this is just Bukhari.
Okay. Well, stop and think. Throw this back and forth, Hatun. What you have just shown. No, let's just look at the two of us talking for a moment. Listen, I want to ask you some questions, and I want you to come to some conclusions. Go ahead. Just bring the two of us back up again.
Yeah, we are. What do you see? You mean take down your PowerPoint?
Yeah, just take it down for now. I mean, just down. Yeah, there we go. Now stop and think. What you're telling me, and what we're finding out is, even those 9 different compilations, of which there were differences between them, where are those 9 today in extant manuscripts? Can you show me?
Allah knows best. It's not only like where are they from the manuscripts. It like Islamic tradition talks about how Muslims. I'm just looking from the traditional side, and I'm just trying to say like even historical side has like bigger problem. What traditional side has problem as well. Like it talks about, for example, Nafsi had 300 less hadith than other students. Some students had only 200 less hadiths from what Bukhari already compiled. So it talks about they were disagreeing with one another, and a miracle happens. We lose what kind of other people who were disagreeing with one student. So only one student survives out of 4. That's like problem by itself. What happened to those? I don't know. Allah knows best. But Islamic tradition tells me they were disagreeing and we don't have them.
Okay. Now, getting back to this discussion, what Farid's complaining about is that we're putting the 9th and 10th century is too late for him. We have many more that predate that. So I want you to go to the next slide. Go to the next slide, and I want to show you.
Just from the traditional side, even the current Bukhari is from Yunini, and that's been canonized in 1895, and we don't have like even full manuscripts that like 7,000 hadith as in manuscript form. So that's even problem. I think you've been very generous when you say, oh, Bukhari is 870 according to tradition. That's not like,
don't use 870. That confuses people. Let's just use 14th and 15th century, because now people think it is 800 AD. No, it's not 8th century. Be careful, because you're now saying 8th century AH. That's going to confuse people. Just keep to AD.
Okay, no, when I said like...
You really mean 1200, 1300.
870 when the Bukhari died, but the canonization of Bukhari in 1895. So
AD.
that's like, yeah.
And let's go back and we're agreed on that. The final canonization. Go to the next slide, and I want to show you what we now know. I wish I have it animated, so it's really good animated, but since your material, you've got the wrong one here. Okay, you've got to go back and get the other one, the non-animated one, if you don't mind. Just stop this and bring up the non-animated one, because this one is not going to look good.
Okay, I'll keep this on the screen while you talk about it. Give me a second.
Okay. So go ahead. And so and this is the difficulty that the Farids of the world don't know. Listen, Farid is not unique. Almost every Muslim scholar that we talk to about this says the same thing Farid is saying. And that is, we have much earlier manuscripts. We have much earlier writings. The difficulty in what they won't say is, where are these earlier ones, and where are their extant manuscripts? That's what we're looking for, extant manuscripts. And at the very end, I'll say why this is important. This is what we call textual criticism. Textual criticism and codicology and paleography demand that you always go to the earliest manuscript, because the one that then becomes the standard. Now, you call it canonization, but the one that is used to create that canon, in this case for al-Bukhari, is much, much later. So now go to the next slide, and there you see, take a look, and you notice all the ones that I have in green and blue there on the left. Those are the ones we have been quoting all the time. We've been quoting them, have we not? And they're kind of small there, but this is al-Bukhari. You can see the dates. The dates are quite simple. Al-Bukhari, Ibn Majah, Sahih Muslim, Tirmidhi, Dawud, and also Nisai. Those are.
Can I just add something on that? We are using these sources because this is what Muslims told us. Yeah. Until like we kind of dig into it and then explored what it means. But like you are gently forced what Muslims are telling you to just follow.
Now that in and of itself is already difficult. But take a look at the black names. The black names are the repeat of everything you see blue and green, but they are now showing where the first extant manuscript for every one of those. So for instance, Abu Dawud, the first extant manuscript, does not exist until the 11th century. So already we're talking about 200 years later than what Muslims have been telling us. When you look at An-Nasai.
Sorry, just a second, Jay. Is that complete manuscript?
Those are the ones that they use today. So we know what Abu Dawud. Those are complete manuscripts that we have today. The earliest An-Nasai manuscript that we use today is from the 12th century. That is 300 years later than what Muslims have been claiming. The one for Ibn Majah is 13th century. That's 400 years later. And then the ones for Tirmidhi, Muslim, and Bukhari are 14th and 15th century. Those are 500 to 600 years later. So this whole thing that Fadi's trying to get out is saying these are earlier and we've got even earlier ones. That's a lie. This is all a lie. When he starts picking all these books off the shelf, those are ones that are printed today in the 21st century, and they're attributed back to these people. But none of them are from these people. They're from much, much later. And here's the irony. Most of them exist today because of Europeans. It's the Europeans that have rescued them and put them into a codex form so that we can read them and see the cohesive story. I gave you already the example of Wustenfeld. Go to the next slide, and I want to show you what we now know about Al-Tabari, because Al-Tabari is probably the kingpin. If you go to slide number 12.
Yeah, just a question. Someone says it doesn't matter if you don't have the manuscripts.
Who do you think I am? That's a great. I mean, I hope you say that tongue in cheek. Manuscripts don't matter, brother. So long as someone said that they had heard it from Muhammad, that is fine by us. And that's exactly what they want us to believe. As long as someone says it, we can trust it. Now, can you imagine that we would do that with Jesus Christ? Can you imagine that we would say, as long as we hear what people are saying about him, we'll let you go with what he says? Here's the irony, and I'm going to get into this a little later on, and that is when you look at the what we call the standard Christian narrative, which is the traditions surrounding Jesus Christ, like the Sirah and the Hadith and the Tafsir and the Tahriq of Jesus, all of them written by those who knew Jesus, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, who were right there, and they saw what he did and they saw what he said, and others like Paul, who didn't know him, but wrote, inspired by the Holy Spirit, not really what Jesus said, but what Jesus said, taken and introduced into different church settings so that it was manifested, in other words, worked out in those churches in Ephesus and Philippi, in Corinth, and in Rome. And then, of course, the history of Luke's writing of the book of Acts. All of those, when you look and see those genre, those are all written by eyewitnesses. They were written by those who were with Jesus. They were written by those who saw what he did and heard what he said. And that's why they're so much more authoritative. Now, the earliest manuscripts we have for those start to appear in the 2nd century, and they continue. But major manuscripts are the palimpsest, the vellum, the animal skins. Those begin in the 4th century. And that's why we're demanding the same of Islam. Islam is not dependent on papyrus like the early church fathers, and all of the earliest writers were dependent on papyrus. These are interlocking leaves that disintegrate. The Muslims cannot make that excuse because every one of these writers were in the caliphal courts. They were commissioned by the caliph to do what they did. They would have written on animal skins. They would have had the authority to do so, and they would have had the means to do so. Not the case of the early church, who were poor, did not have animal skins to write on. That's very expensive. One manuscript like the Sinaiticus, 52 different deer just to make that one manuscript. So now we get to Al-Tabari. Al-Tabari.
Okay, let me just add before you move to Al-Tabari. So I think it is very dangerous even for the Muslims when they say, oh, we take this because Muhammad said so. Muslims' eternity is depend on what Muhammad did, how Muhammad lived his life, how Muhammad made his judgment, therefore he's going to make the same judgment. So it is affecting something, their eternity, therefore it is not fair for anyone to say, oh, because Muhammad said so, therefore let me take it. When we look at the Islamic tradition, like in 700s, Muslims were killing one another. Simply people were saying, oh, this is what Muhammad said, and other person was disagreeing. So people kind of crucified, like there is a guy crucified, simply someone claimed that he forged the hadiths, and then he said, yeah, I forged hadiths, and then they crucified him. So within even 100 years, it was very important. It's not what Muhammad said, but or someone said they heard from Muhammad, because that's what everyone was doing so. And also helpful to remember, for someone to be Muslim, they cannot just live their life, oh, because someone said so. They need to act on it. And without hadith, they wouldn't even know how to pray or when to do ghusl. So in that sense, those very kind of statements which we are talking are important. So it needs to be known, yes, it come from Muhammad, he is my evidence. Please also look at from that side as well. Yes, Jay, you and Tabari.
Okay, now we're going to get to Tabari. Now, this is another European that we have to thank for. The Al-Tabari, we would not have Al-Tabari in our hands today had it not been for a man named Michael Jan de, and I don't know how to pronounce that, is George or George, I don't know, I'm mispronouncing it, I'm sure, a professor of Arabic at the Leiden University in Germany. It was he that did, much like Wustenfeld had done with the Sirah, he did the same thing with the Al-Tabaris, compiling and grabbing and getting as many material that is attributed to Al-Tabari, and he put it into a book form, which was then published in 1901. So we're just talking about in the last century, known as the Leiden edition. Now, at least with the Leiden edition, we know from where he got his material from. Most of it came from two documents in Istanbul known as the Koprului. You can pronounce it better than I can because that's in Turkish. Those are two documents that were written in 1244 and 1253. So we're talking about the 13th century. We're talking about the Ottoman period, which is interesting. Most of these major manuscripts are written in the during the Ottoman time. Your people in Turkey, the Ottomans were the ones that really grabbed them and made them and put them into manuscripts. So the question needs to be asked, if this is the case, so even Al-Tabari's Tahriq and his Tafsir, they are not 10th century originals. They're not 10th century originals, but are much later 13th century compilations, which were merely attributed back to Al-Tabari 300 years earlier, yet they are still 600 years too late. What's more, it took a German scholar to compile them 1,200 years later. Where are the Muslims here? Why hadn't they compiled it? And why is it that the Germans had to do it for them in the 1800s? Obviously, the Muslims don't really consider this to be that important. Today, they now consider it to be important. And now they're publishing it and they're putting it in. That's why Farid can put them off his shelf. But no one's looking and seeing when every one of these things he quoted, when they were actually written. So the Al-Tabari, that gives us almost all the stories of how Islam began. He is the one that has the greatest compilation, really come from the 13th century, well, but put together in the 19th and 20th century.
That's concerning. But first, I guess one of the questions also is, why do they need at the first place for tafsir? Why do they need at the first place these writings? And Tabari is known, as you expressed, like giant of Islam, yet we don't have his writings, and then people later decided to pull things together.
You want the answer?
If you would like to share it, why not?
During the Ottoman period, all of these debates were happening as to who was going to take power, from what family was the authority going to come from who, how are you going to walk, talk, eat, drink, sleep? How are you going to do that? And in order to do that, you need to have the prophet as your example. So you start writing back and putting it onto the prophet's life, and you start attributing it to the prophet Muhammad. But what you do is you have a guy like a guy named Al-Tabari who then compiles all of these contradictory stories. And that's what Al-Tabari is known for. He's known for a lot of contradictory stories. And he puts it up there and he says, now you decide which one you want to do, which gives ability for any ruler or anybody who has authority or have power. Says, well, Muhammad did it, therefore I can do it. Or Muhammad did this, therefore I can do it. Or the Sahaba did it, and since they were following Muhammad, since they saw what he did and heard what he said, we can do it. That gives authority to almost every one of their pronouncement, and gives authority to almost how they want to create Islam. And it's created in Islam's image, but from documents that were first created in the 13th century, not the 10th century. So that's the difficulty. And even then, you can see it was not compiled until the 19th and 20th century, which to me is absolutely befuddling if it is that important. But before we go on, and I need to be careful of my time, I want to now go back to the Sahaba themselves. So go to the next slide. Now here is the Sahaba, and remember, this is what Farid really was excited about. He was excited about these guys, the Muwatta ibn Malik, Sahifa of Haman bin Munabi, the Musnad of Ibn Hanbal, the Musnaf of Abdul Razak, the Musnad of Al-Tayalisi, and he kept on pulling them off. I have it here, I have it here, I have Malik, I have Munabi, I have here Hanbal, I have here Razak, and he put them up real quickly so that we wouldn't really take a look at. And he says, CJ, these are all from the time of the Prophet himself. These are the Sahaba. These are the companions. And then some are the Tabi'un, like Abi Shaiba. These are ones that come a little later, but they know it from the Sabiyun, the Sahaba. So here's the crazy thing. You look at that and say, wow, that's true. These guys really were there. They were just like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They were there witnessing what Muhammad did. They were there witnessing what Muhammad said. These all predate Bukhari, these all predate Tirmidhi, these predate Isham, these all predate Al-Tabari. We don't have to use these. We can go to these guys. And that's what Farid was trying to get at. He was saying, look, we have so much more than what you're giving us credit for. Without asking, hold on a minute, where's the earliest manuscript? Where is the earliest extant manuscript for any one of these six? Take a look and see where they are. The first one is the Muwatta of Ibn Malik. That doesn't even begin to appear until the 9th century. That's 200 years later. And then the other ones, like Sahifa, Haman bin Munabi, does not appear to the 12th century. The other four, that's the Musnad Ibn Hanbal, the Musnaf Abu Razak, the Musnaf Al-Tayalisi, and the Abi Shaiba, do not appear until the 13th century. That is, folks, that is, in this case, 700 years to the 13th century. You can see we're talking about 600 to 700 years much later. 600, let's say 600 years later. All of these are anywhere from 200 to 600 years too late. And nobody questioned him. In fact, my researcher, Dr. Pat Andrews, said, I'm the first one that's doing this. You're actually going to be the first one on the internet to actually expose this. And this is true. What we're doing here, Hatun, we're the first to actually expose it. No one has done what we have just said. No one has actually looked at the extant manuscripts. And see, the reason why this is important for me, Hatun, let's go ahead and take the slide down.
Okay, let me just add a couple of things already what is on the slide. So Robert Spencer was talking about it other day. For example, Shafiat Hamam bin Munabin, the second blue person on your list. Farid was saying, for example, this was written within 50 years after death of Muhammad, but this guy was like born 715, so he was born like almost 720 or something. So he born like almost 80 years after death of Muhammad, so it can't be written. And then who was Bukhara?
On this list here?
Yeah. So like the informations which Farid is kind of putting together the names. Oh yeah, those are all before from the time of Sahaba is all that's not true. Like that's really seriously not true, because
every one of us. Now, let's not say he's lying. I don't think he's lying. He's just not aware of this. No one has put this up on the internet before. No one's bothered to do what we've just done today.
No,
this is the first anybody's seen this.
I don't know if you have a book in your hand, and if you are kind of saying, okay, you've got to read this book because this book is debunking you, I am assuming you already looked into book and you already know what you are saying. So if you are saying, oh, this guy is from within 50 years from death of Muhammad, he was not even born. So that's like simply false information. I'm not sure if I can say, oh, he just didn't know. I think he's intentionally misguiding. But
whatever the case, I'm not going to say that. What I will say this is no, let's look at the conclusions here. Every Muslim scholar, and I would say Western scholars, have all believed that the stories surrounding Muhammad's life were written by those who were actually there. The Sahaba, they talk about the Sahaba. Those are some of the names you see on the screen. Or the Tabi'un, that's the first and second generation from the prophets, thus by eyewitnesses. Yet we now find out that they were all written by others over 200 to 600 years later and simply redacted back to the 7th and 8th centuries. Thus, I would suggest they are all fraudulent. None of them are true. And that's why the Farids of the world, they need to be careful, because we're going to hang them on this. From here on out, we're just going to keep on showing these timelines. You need, and this is something that Muslims don't like me to do, and I keep on doing it. Prove it from the century they lived. Show me where these manuscripts are. I've said this about Mecca. I've said this about the Quran. We've said this about the earliest manuscripts. We've talked about this all the time. Where are the earliest manuscripts that we see that come from Abu Bakr or from Uthman? Where is this Uthmanic recension? How many times have we asked that? For years we've been asking that, and they cannot provide us one. And we're asking the same thing about these traditions. These traditions are not as important as the Quran. I'm not saying that they are as important, but for people like Farid and others, they are absolutely essential for them to know how to walk, talk, eat, and drink, because the Quran doesn't tell you how to walk, talk, eat, and drink. These traditions do. And they've all been attributed back to the Sahaba and the Tabi'un and these traditional writers like Hisham and Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, Tirmidhi, and all the others, and especially Al-Tabari. They've all been attributed them so that Muslims today can feel confident that they're acting like Muhammad acted, that they're saying what Muhammad said, that they're doing what their greatest model, the greatest model in mankind, their model has done. And that's why they're absolutely dependent that these do come from that man in that place at that time, doing and saying those things. And we're just shutting this down today. None of these come from the 7th century. None of them even come from the 8th century. They only begin to appear in the 9th century, and that's the Muwatta ibn Malik. And then they start to appear in the 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, up until the 15th century. And most of them are not even written down until the 18th century, proving that almost everything Muslims are dependent on, how to walk, talk, eat, and drink, is not at all from the Umayyad period. It's possibly a one or two bits and pieces from the Abbasid period, but the majority of everything that they're dependent on is from the Ottoman period, from 1299 and later. That's why much of Islam, as I used to say, it was an Abbasid invention. I'm going to have to start saying much of Islam, the Islam we know today, including the Muhammad we know today, that's what we start out with, is more than likely much more of an Ottoman edifice and what the Ottomans wanted us to believe than even what the Abbasids, or dare we say the Umayyads, who most of which who were Christian to begin with.
Can I ask a practical question?
I have one more thing before we do this. I want to go to the next slide, because I'm going to show you why this is taking place, why this is happening. Go to slide number 14. Now, here's the caution. Be careful. Christians, don't start triumphalizing, say, oh, wait, this is exactly what we've been waiting for. Yay, now we really got the Muslims. No, be careful, be careful. We've got much the same problem. We have many of the same things going on in Christianity. That's why we're aware of this. Remember, the Christians have done this before. We have the Gnostic Gospels. There's the 52 Gospels that are found in Nag Hammadi in Egypt, written in Coptic, purporting to tell stories of Jesus' childhood. Yet they were all written in the 4th century and redacted back to the 1st century. Yes, we know about this. These were found in the pits, the garbage dumps known as Oxyrhynchus. The most exciting of them is called the Gospel of Thomas. Muslims love this one, and also the Gospel of Judas, which were written around the 2nd century, but are attributed back to authors to have written by the disciples themselves of Jesus. And then, of course, the most notorious one is the Gospel of Barnabas, also the favorite of the Muslims. But it was written in 1634, but was attributed to the companion of Paul in the 1st century. So what's going on here? These are Gnostic writings. These are apocryphal writings. These are sectarian writings, all of them written by individuals in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, all the way up until the 17th century. They were all written in order to give a credibility and authority for their works. So this practice of redactions and attributions is common in every religion. We see it in Christianity, but here's the difference. Here's the difference. The difference is that while the later Muslim traditions are all considered authoritative for Muslims today, the later Christian traditions that I'm just referring to, that's the Gospel of Thomas, Gospel of Judas, Gospel of Barnabas, they are all considered fraudulent and never used by the church. We don't use them because they are so late. So we have done our job for them. We're way ahead of the Muslims. We already know which are fraudulent and which are authentic. We already know what to throw away and not to follow. Look at the Gospel of Thomas and look what it says about Jesus. He has him killing people. That's not our Jesus. Look at the Gospel of Barnabas. He's a Muslim. No, maybe in the 7th century, whoever wrote that in Spain thought he was a Muslim, but that is the 7th century. That's why we reject it. We don't accept any of them because they don't follow what the Gospels say. They completely reject what the Gospels say. They go against what the Gospels say. And that's why the early church never accepted them, but they were all written so late anyways. That's why we don't accept them. Here, interestingly, every Muslim is accepting the latest material.
Okay,
They're
so
accepting what's
the reason,
and not going to the originals.
okay, the reason Gospel of Thomas or Gospel of Barnabas is not identified as Gospel because they are written very, very late and it contains mistakes in it. For example, Gospel of Barnabas calls Muhammad Messiah. All those, like, we can look what it is written and then we can say, not when I say we, like scholars can look into it, what it is written, and then they can say, what was this? Is this something from the 1st century? Can this be from the author which is claimed to be coming from? And the answers are no, because Thomas did not write the so-called Gospel of Thomas. Barnabas did not write the Gospel of Barnabas, and that's not the disciple which by people are kind of assuming. So we can look at informations that mention in it and then confirm if that is from the 1st century, who were eyewitness to life of Jesus, or who kind of lived in the 1st century. That's the kind of criteria. But when we look at the Islamic tradition, what we see is like places, people, are they mentioned, were they exist in 7th century?
Yeah.
And
No.
then the question is, no, they were not. Therefore, we are saying it is written and reductant back to 7th century. That's kind of the concerning issue here.
And that's why, as Christians, we are aware of this problem. We know it better than anybody else because we have been confronted with the sectarian writings. We have been confronted with the Gnostic writings. We have been confronted with the Gospel of Thomas. And that's why people, there are so many writers up there who would like the Gospel of Thomas to be the authoritative one. But their problem is it's written too late to be authoritative. So if that is the case with us as Christians, we not only have the right, but we have the responsibility to then demand the same of Islam and demand the same of the Upanishads or the Bhagavad Gita or the Vedas of Hinduism. We must do the same thing. We do this with the Books of Mormon. We do this with the Jehovah's Witnesses. We do this with the Granth Sahib of the Sikhs. We demand of all of these religions, whenever they have any writings that they claim are historically sound, we demand to prove that. You have to do a textual criticism of them. You have to do looking at paleography of them. You need to look at all the criteria that shows that those documents were written in that time by that person in that place. In this case, what we have seen is that every one of these traditions that the Muslims are absolutely dependent on are not written in the 7th century. They're not even written in the 8th century. They only begin to appear in the 9th century, written by totally other individuals whose names are not on their documents. Their names are given to give credibility to them, just like the Gnostic Gospels. The Gospel of Thomas is given a name of one of the disciples of Jesus, Barnabas, the companion of Paul, to give authority to it, but had nothing to do with Thomas, had nothing to do with Barnabas. In the same way, these have nothing to do with Hisham or Al-Bukhari or Sahih Muslim or even Tirmidhi or Al-Tabari. These are nothing more than fictional books that are written so that the rulers and the people of that time who were writing them, many of them in the Ottoman period, to give authority to either a thing they want to happen or a new pronouncement or a new law that was being introduced. In order to give authority to that law or what is happening, they have to trace it back to one of the Sahaba, one of the Tabi'un, one of those who actually knew Muhammad. That's how you get authority. But they are as fraudulent as you can get. And that's why Muslims, be careful. Don't just start picking books off your shelf and say, see, I've got this. See, I've got this. Look and see where that book came from and where is the first extant manuscript.
Even though, let's say, he grabs those books from his bookshelves and then says, oh, this goes back to Muhammad or this goes back to companions, it is helpful to remember Islamic tradition did not, or Muslim scholars did not canonize those traditions. You've got like hadiths, Munas al-Razraq, it has like over 20,000 hadiths apparently, and they are not being chosen, they are not being canonized if they still survived. So there are like, yes, people so-called, according to tradition, people so-called wrote them, but still they were not canonized, or something happened, they disagreed with Bukhari or something, they didn't make into the Islamic tradition. Even like in one of your slides, you were talking about, I can't remember if it was slide or something, you were talking about Hanbal. It is, remember, like how difficult.
Number 13, if you want to go back to him.
Yeah, Ibn Hanbal. What slide number did you say?
Slide, the one right before this one. There you go.
Yeah, so even in this one, for example, remember when we kind of bring stories from Musnad Ibn Hanbal, Muslims would simply discredit it. It's same with the Ibn Malik, like when we brought that, they, oh no, we want Sahih Bukhari, we want Sahih Bukhari. So what is the reason, do you think, now they want to go to these different names and they kind of simply put Bukhari under the bus?
I think an awful lot of it has to do with what you want to use this person for. There is material that Hanbal says that was much more much more legalistic, and that's why they wanted to go something that was not as legalistic. So you always quote Bukhari, and you say Bukhari is the more authoritative. Now, what's interesting is Hanbal was first written down in the 13th century. Bukhari doesn't get written down to the 14th and 15th century. So these discussions that you're having about are coming post 15th century. And I would suggest that these are all Ottoman discussions.
Well, thank you for pointing out how Ottomans contribute to the world of Islam.
Unfortunately, these are your people. Let's end with the slide number 17. Here are the conclusions, and we can just conclude here. Now, I don't really need to read these. You can see the remit was to investigate everything Muslims know, everything they follow concerning their Prophet Muhammad. Your question at the very beginning was, did he even exist? I would suggest no, he didn't exist. Not the Muhammad of Islam, not the Muhammad that Muslims not worship. They don't worship him, but the ones that they follow as their paradigm, as their model. It's obvious that everything that they are dependent on, this book, this man, in this place, they are also dependent on the traditions, which give them and unpack what the book, the man, and the place say. Now, we have always assumed, Hatun, and you've said this, I've said it, we've done it in many of our broadcasts, that these are 9th and 10th century. That's bad enough because that's 200 to 300 years later. What we're now seeing, we can no longer say that. They're not 9th and 10th century. Just the Muwatta begins in the 9th century, which is just fragments of the Muwatta. We don't even have the full Muwatta. But they already don't begin in the 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th century. And then, of course, were then compiled in the 1800s, about the 19th century, by mostly Europeans. So it's this that we need to start pushing into our talks, in our discussions. So when Muslims come back on us, you can go ahead and put that slide down, and just the two of us talking now. When Muslims respond to this, and they will say, we can trust it, just like that individual that said, as long as Muslims say it, I believe it. We no longer believe them. I think they've called wolf too many times. And to be fair, they've not seen what we have just shown today. This is going to be new for an awful lot of Muslims. And I don't know. I don't have people who are watching. I don't hear their comments. Is anybody coming back with a response? Do you see any response? Because I'd like to see what Muslims, how they will respond to this. If this is that late, if these are all so late, 200 to 600 years after the attributions, even what they attribute it to, these are 200 to 600 years later, then where in the world are they going to find this Muhammad? And where in the world are they going to find everything they know there to follow? How are they going to be able to follow this man if there's nothing written about him for a good 300 to 400 years after, if he even existed after he supposedly died? Can you then understand, how would we do that with Jesus Christ? Can you imagine what we're saying as a comparison? If we were dependent for Jesus, what the Muslims are dependent for Muhammad, we would know nothing about Jesus until the 4th century. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John would all be writing possibly in the 3rd and 4th century. They would all be living in what is today Turkey, hundreds of miles away up in the north. None of them would be there in Jerusalem or in Nazareth or in Bethlehem or where Jesus grew up and lived. None of them would live that far south. They'd be way up hundreds of miles to the north, and they would be writing hundreds, 300 to 400 to 800 years, 8th century, after Jesus Christ. How in the world would we defend Jesus? Thank God we have all kinds of references to Jesus, even outside our traditions. And thank God we don't have to depend for the 4th, 5th, 6th, and up until the 8th century to even show who he was or what he says. We have people that were actually there, that actually were eyewitnesses. Fadi brings up a comment, and he says, we as Muslims, we even know what Muhammad did. We know that he ate chickens. See how specific we know? Whereas you Christians, you can't even prove that Jesus claimed to be God. What a comparison. I laughed when I heard that. I said, now, can you prove that Muhammad ate chickens? Can you even prove that Muhammad ate anything? Because everything that you're going to go to find those chickens are going to be from the 12th, 13th, up until the 16th century. Whereas I can go right back to the 1st century, and I just can go right up to Matthew chapter 26, and I can hear what Jesus quoted there in the Sanhedrin when he claimed to be God 3 times in front of Caiaphas. He claimed to be the Son of God, he claimed to be the Messiah, he claimed to be the Son of Man. 3 times he was saying, I am God, I am God, I am God, in one scenario, and that's why Caiaphas had to tear his robe and turn towards the Sanhedrin and say, what further proof do we mean? This man has blasphemed. And then look and see what he did in the temple there in John 8:58, when he was there claiming to be who? The personal name for God? Yahweh, not ego eimi, or God in English. He would have been speaking Hebrew in the temple. He was claiming to give God's personal name. So we have 1st century evidence and 2nd century compilations of these events. That's why it's so good to know that we can trust who Jesus was, we can trust what he did, and we can certainly trust what he said, because they were written down by people who were actually there hearing him. They were there watching what he did. And that's why we can trust what we know about this person, Jesus Christ. I'm so glad I don't have to defend Muhammad now. I'm so glad I don't have to defend the man that you asked and started this whole episode out. And that is, do you really saying that Muhammad didn't exist? Until a Muslim can show me any material from the 7th century, an extant manuscript that I can put my hands in and can look at, that's written by a caliph named Abu Bakr or Uthman or Ali or anybody of Umar, any of these caliphs, anything that was written at that time of people that actually saw this man and actually heard what he said, unless they can show me something from that century. Because look, we're not talking about the 1st century, we're talking about the 7th century. The 7th century, we're talking about the caliph. We're not talking about poor Christians who didn't have manuscripts or didn't have vellum. We're talking about the caliphs themselves. Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali. These were caliphs. They had all the means to write this down and keep it in material that we could see today. Not one of those manuscripts exists. There. That's why it's now, the onus is over to the Muslims.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions. What are the sources, if there is any, from 7th century and 8th century talks about Muslims and talks about Islam?
None. Those 2 words don't exist in the 7th century in any written form that we can. Now, this is coming from the German school, and this is why I love Dr. Robert Kerr. He is the one that says, Jay, you cannot find the word Muslim or the phrase Islam in the 7th century. They only start to appear during the Abbasid period in the 8th century.
Okay,
but
we don't have there is no any non-Muslim sources talking about Islam or Muslims, correct?
No. And look and see what they claim. There are 5 references that they do give, these Arabs. They call themselves Hagarines. That means the line of Hagar. They call themselves Ishmaelites. That means through Ishmael to Hagar. They call themselves Muhajiruns. Now, that could be either people on Exodus, but most scholars believe that is the people of Hagar like Hagarines. They call themselves Muhajiruns. Hajir, again, the people who are in plural form, masculine plural, for people of Hagar. And then they are called by others Saracids. No reference to Muslims. Those are the 5 things they call them. Even as far as the 8th century, when you have John of Damascus referring to them as Saracids, he doesn't call them Muslims at all either. Isn't that interesting? He calls them Ishmaelites. And look at his greatest work, the heresy of the Ishmaelites. He doesn't say the heresy of the Muslims. He says the Ishmaelites. Read the books in their century, and you will see there were no Muslims that early.
Okay. My next question is it possible that Ibn Ishaq's work could have been destroyed by the Mongols in 1300s, 13th century?
What then? If you're going to say that, then almost everything has been destroyed by the Mongols, but show me one reference. And remember, this material was all over the Muslim world by the 13th century. By 13th century, it should have been everywhere. It should not have just been in the centers of power in Mecca and Medina.
So you are saying Muslims were in power, they were controlling things.
Well, not only that, the Mongols didn't control the entire Muslim world. So there have been thousands of manuscripts that would, this whole thing about Mongols destroying everything in 1258. What did the Mongols destroy, and where is there any reference to that? Where are they? Now, if anything, they would have probably gone after the Quran itself. But why is it we can find manuscripts from the Quran from the 8th, 9th, and 10th century? And this is long before the 13th century. So they would have destroyed the earliest manuscripts of the Quran. But here again, we don't see any reference to this like we have for the Bible. Look at the Bible, the Edict of Diocletian in 300 AD, where they destroyed thousands upon thousands of Bibles, burned them. That happened before the Council of Nicaea, and that's why when Constantine came, he commissioned those 50 manuscripts to be created in the 4th century. So we have reference of that. There's all kinds of references of the Romans destroying Bibles. We don't have any reference of the Mongols doing the same.
Okay, Muslims have Quranic manuscripts from 8th century though. Next question is, so if Muhammad didn't exist, how and why do we have the Sunni and Shia split?
Yeah, and that has an awful lot to do. This is Robert Spencer answered this really good when you asked him this question, and that is, what do you do with the Sunni Shia? That's nothing more than political gain. This is a argument that's a political argument as to who inherits the mantle of the Prophet. The Prophet has been chosen, and the Persians are very clear that they wanted to make sure that they are the ones that gain the power because they claim to be in the line of the Prophet. Those are the Shiites. The Arabs, the other Arabs, say, no, it has to be anybody from the ulema. The ulema would be the scholars. So that's why this is a political argument that was probably happening during the Abbasid period, moving into the Ottoman period. And so that's why this is a much later, but here's another example of exactly what we're saying. This is a much later political argument that is redacted back and put into al-Bukhari and to also the traditions to show that this existed from the time of Ali. And that's why Ali is the one that is given that mantle. And then of course, Hussein is the one that takes on that mantle. And of course, when he is killed at Karbala, it then goes into secret. So this is a political argument, not a theological argument, that's much later redacted back to give authority to it from the time of the 7th century.
How do you prove this huge conspiracy Ottomans are creating sin?
I don't have to prove it. I just have to say, can you see? I'm not saying that they consider. I'm not saying at all that that this is a conspiracy they created. I'm saying what I'm saying. Let me get me right. Is that it looks like that most of this material was being created all the way along from the Abbasid period. I think it started with the Abbasid period because the Abbasid wanted to eradicate and destroy what the Umayyads had done. They hated the Umayyads, and that's why they moved the capital from Damascus down to Baghdad. Now by that time, there was a prophet. He is the new Muhammad, the third Muhammad. The Jews and the Christians are still waiting for theirs. We have now got the Muhammad. But once you do that, then you've got to give them a backstory. So the backstory starts to be created. Now, that backstory looks like it went through many different irradiations. It was evolving all the way through the centuries. And what tends to happen is when you bring a new irradiation, when you bring a new evolution, you destroy what you're confronting. And once you destroy it, then you bring a new one, and you bring a new one. So finally, during the Ottoman period, you finally have what they wanted, what the Ottomans wanted. And that's why by the 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th century, the al-Bukhari, there may have been someone named al-Bukhari in the 9th century. I cannot say because we don't know. What we know is that what is attributed to him, what is given him, is not from him. It is from the Ottomans, who by the time of they take power in the 13th century, they want their Islam to reflect their needs, their desires, and their aspirations. That's why they keep writing these al-Bukhari and putting his name on it, but then they probably add to it, and that's why we have 9 volumes today. Why is it we shouldn't have just 1 volume? And that's why you have so many differences between Bukhari and Muslim. I mean, now you have such a derivation, and that's why Al-Tabari is used as a kind of collector of everything, and it's just thrown out there for people to pick and choose what they want. That makes sense if this is something that's evolving over century after century after century.
Well, volumes are simply like following different category stuff, but also within. Not only there is a difference between Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, there are differences within Sahih Bukhari. There are not differences, contradictions within Sahih
Bukhari. Absolutely, yeah. And that makes sense. If man is continuing to do it, they don't have the time. They didn't think anybody would actually look and read them and actually show that there are problems with them. Nobody really thought that through as they were doing it. In the same token, if they really believed that the Quran is that great and that important, why didn't they, for heaven's sakes, preserve the original manuscript? Or even one of the 5. Okay,
What is
apostasy law, that's easily because you need to keep people within Islam. You don't want them to convert. Well, therefore, you create an apostasy law.
without?
And then you attribute it to Muhammad.
Okay. And even Muslim scholars are saying without apostasy law, there wouldn't be any Islam today. So apostasy law is there to protect ideology of Islam. Next question.
Yusuf Qaradawi, who speaks there at Qatar, he is on Al Jazeera. He is the one that has quoted that. He has quoted that not more than once, and more than once. And he has said, "Listen, without the apostasy law, there would be no Islam. They absolutely have to have the apostasy law to keep people."
And modern scholars are talking about it as well. Current 20th century scholars. Somehow, the most ancient copy of the Quran just happened to turn up in Birmingham, England, in the library basement.
Okay, that's a complete misnomer. Let me just help them with that real quick. The Birmingham Monument, and you could probably do this one, Hatun, as well. So add to it as you see it. Remember, the Birmingham manuscript is only 2 folios, front and back, front and back. It's 2 pages, front and back. And it only has 63 verses in it. There are 6,236 verses in the Quran. So this is not a whole Quran. And it's derived from 3 different surahs, chapter 18, a little bit from chapter 19, and a lot from chapter 20. 3 different stories. And look at those stories of those 3 chapters. They have nothing to do with Islam. They are all pre-Islamic. These stories existed from, well, the story of Moses was in the Bible. So that's from 1400 BC. But the story of the 7 sleepers of Ephesus, that's from your country. That's from Turkey. You can go to Ephesus and see where that cave is. That is from the 2nd century AD and was rewritten in the 6th century AD, and that's why it gets incorporated into Arabic. The other one of the Matthew, I'm just off the top of my head, Sophrastus, that is from about 560 AD. So that is all pre-Islamic, pre-Quranic, and certainly if there was a Muhammad, pre-Muhammad. These are stories that were bouncing around all over the place at that time. So it stands to reason. If you borrow material and put it into the Quran, that which you borrow has to have existed earlier, has to be earlier in order for you to borrow it. In Arabic as well, and that's why they're not all 3 together in one place. They're bits and pieces here, and they don't follow each other. This is nothing more than borrowing existing stories, sticking them into the Quran, and they shouldn't have borrowed the story of the 7 sleepers of Ephesus. That doesn't make any sense. That has nothing to do with theology. And the story of Moses would have been about the best one for them to borrow. So that's why we can pretty much trace every one of these. Now, notice what I've just done. I've given dates to every one of these stories. I've put them back and shown that we know the date when those written. We know who wrote them. We even know where they were written. They all predate Islam. They were not, they all predate the Quran. They were not written in original form in Arabic. Some were written in Hebrew, like the story of Moses. They were written in Syriac, or they were written in Aramaic. But they were then taken and lifted out of Syriac, Hebrew, and Aramaic and put into Arabic sometime in the 8th century. But even when they were put in there in the 8th and 9th century, there was no vowelization or dotting, so they didn't really know what they were reading. You could see that's why they just stuck them willy-nilly into it. And at that time, they didn't even know what it was that they were reading. That had to be done much later. And that's when the dots and vowels were then introduced or created to eradicate that problem.
And addition to that, it's helpful to remember, even if it's only 2 folios, there are textual variations between those folios and current Quran. And Quranic scholars express it is impossible. This is pre-Uthmanic, and it is dated 8th or 9th century. So sadly, no, it's just maybe it appeared in Birmingham, but everyone makes mistakes. And I've got 2 more questions, Jay. Sorry. I don't follow the question. You might be able to follow what it is happening. What of the Muslims visiting the Coptic church? Could there be any evidence there?
Okay, I think what they're talking about is in Egypt, St. Catherine's Monastery. St. Catherine's Monastery is a treasure trove of manuscript. Interestingly, it's where the oldest Arabic codex for the New Testament lies. That's the Codex 151. Codex Sinaiticus 151, which is still there in St. Catherine's Monastery, and it's dated to 868. That's the 9th century, all in Arabic. So that's why it would be a treasure trove to find these kind of things if they were there. We haven't found any early manuscripts, Quranic manuscripts that I know of that are early, because why would they? First of all, in the 9th century, by that time, the Christians, if there were Christians, they're not interested in preserving any Qurans, any manuscripts that early. But
Okay.
9th century, again, this is much too earlier for any of these that we've been talking about today. These only begin to appear, and they don't appear in Egypt. They're all appearing in what is today Iraq and what is today Iran. So much further north. That's where all these are being derived.
Is there any chance that this presentation can be available to
Now, this is all going up. In fact, everything that Dr. Pat Andrews, this is all Dr. Pat Andrews, he did the work for me. Dr. Andrews has put all of this up on his site on our fandercenter.org website. Go up there. It's up there already now. So you can see the entire material that I have used. He didn't put it in graph form. I'll put the PowerPoint up. Now that we're putting it out, I'll put the PowerPoint up sometime this weekend or maybe next week. But this is all going up there on fandercenter.org. Everything we do now will be on fandercenter.org.
Okay. Thank you very much. Just last question then. If the Prophet of Islam is not exist as Muslims kind of believe him to be exist, what is the applications of that to Muslims, and how can Christians move forward with this information?
Yeah, well, I think this is the million-dollar question. Muslims now don't have someone to follow, and the man they have been following looks like is nothing more than fictitious. If that is the case, then Muslims need to really start thinking very deeply. Why in the world are they dedicating their entire lives to a non-existent person? Why in the world are they trying to walk, talk, eat, drink, sleep to a man that was concocted over a period of centuries and finally finalized somewhere in the 13th to the 16th century? And why in the world is he that important if he did had to do anything for you, never did one thing for you, and since he didn't exist, you're really just we're following a phantom? Why not come back to the real man? Why not come back to the man who did exist, who has been supported by documentation from his time period, by eyewitnesses who were right there? This is the God who took on human form and took on and died on the cross for us, you and me. This is the God who's done everything for you, because without Jesus Christ, who is well documented historically, not only just by those who were there and who saw him and who heard him, but by many of those who are outside of the Christian sphere, people like historians, Roman historians, like Tacitus, or Jewish historians like Josephus, or Greek satirists like Phlegon, who were actually writing about him within 20 years of his death. They knew about him, and many of them had seen him. This is why we can trust this man who did come to earth, who died and rose again. I would rather you just come on home to Jesus Christ. He is a much more historically attributed individual. None of this is attributed by people that later on and attributed back to him, because we don't accept those attributions. We go back to the authentic article. And he is the only one that dies for you. What has Muhammad done for you? I've been asking that for 40 years. I don't know if anything Muhammad has done for me. And I'm kind of thankful that since he didn't exist, I don't expect to know of anything he's done for me. Jesus did exist. Let's come on home to him.
Well, today Muslims might know or might think that Muhammad ate chicken, but as a Christian, we are confident. We can confidently say that eternal Son of the Father gave himself on the cross for us so that we can spend eternity with him. And that's all we need to be confident about. The one who lay his life down on the cross and then said, I love you from everlasting to everlasting, and walked out of that grave on the third day, wants to spend eternity with people like me and people like you. Jay, really appreciate for coming in, being available, and helping us to think through historical side of Islam, especially the Prophet of Islam. And there are serious questions Muslims need to deal with. And yeah, so you left us with more questions. Really appreciate that. And thank you very much, everyone who joined us in the chat. If you've got more questions on what you heard, put them in the comment side of the YouTube. I can bring Jay up again and then kind of fire him your questions and then see if he's able to answer your questions. God bless you, Jay. Thank you very much for joining me. And thank you very much, everyone who joined us. May Christ crucified, silent with his love, until we see you again.
Amen.